In a dusty Wyoming town, where hope was scarcer than rain, they auctioned off daughters to settle debts. All but one were sold until a stranger's voice called out her name. The sun clings to the horizon, bleeding gold across the parched plains of Laramie, Wyoming, 1878. A restless wind sweeps through, kicking up dust that stings the eyes and coats the tongue. It rattles the warped wooden walls of the town's only saloon, a crumbling relic of better days. Its sign faded to illegible scratches. Inside, the air is heavy with the sour reek of whiskey, sweat, and despair. Lanterns swing faintly, casting jagged shadows across a crowd of men, hard-faced ranchers in weathered hats, merchants with greedy smirks, and drifters clutching their last coins. They huddle around a makeshift stage, a splintered platform where dreams are bartered away. Clara Hensley, 22, stands at the back, her auburn hair pinned loosely, strands escaping to frame her freckled face. Her calico dress, faded from years of scrubbing and mending, hangs loose on her slight frame, but her green eyes burn with a defiance she can't voice. Her hands, rough from farm work, clench into fists, nails digging into her palms as she fights the tremor in her chest. Beside her, her father, Thomas Hensley, slumps at a table, his face gaunt, his fingers wrapped around a bottle of cheap liquor. He hasn't met her gaze since dawn, when he whispered they had no choice. Debts from failed crops and gambling have stripped their family bare, and now his daughters are the price. The auctioneer, a weary man with a pockmarked face and a voice like gravel grinding underfoot, slams his gavel. Next up, the Hensley girls. He barks, his grin sharp as a blade. Clara's three older sisters, Mary, Ruth, and Abigail, stand in a line, their faces pale as the Wyoming moon. Mary, 28, the eldest, steps forward first. Her steady hands, once skilled at weaving, tremble as she's sold to a cattle baron whose cold smile promises nothing but ownership. The bid to $100 draws murmurs from the crowd. Ruth, 25, soft-spoken and gentle, is next, her eyes downcast, as a merchant with a gold watch claims her for $150, eyeing her like a prize mare. Abigail, 23, the closest to Clara in age, fights back tears, her lips quivering as a grizzled miner tosses a bag of coins for her. Each sister's departure feels like a piece of Clara's heart carved away. The crowd's cheers a dull roar in her ears. Outside, the Wyoming plains stretch endlessly, their vastness a cruel mirror to Clara's trapped reality. Sagebrush dots the landscape, swaying under a sky bruised with dusk. The distant mountains, jagged and unyielding, loom like silent judges, watching a town where hope is as scarce as water. Clara's mind churns. She's always been the sharp one, the sister who memorized lines of Shakespeare from a tattered book. Her mother left behind, who outsmarted her brothers at cards with a sly grin. But here, in this stifling saloon, her wit is powerless against the weight of her father's shame and the town's greed. The walls, stained with years of tobacco smoke, seem to press closer, the creak of floorboards a countdown to her fate. As Abigail is led away, her soft sob echoing, the auctioneer's gaze lands on Clara, last of the Hensley lot. He sneers, his voice dripping with disdain. Not much to look at, but she's young enough. Who'll start the bid? The crowd shifts, their laughter low and cruel. Clara steps onto the stage, her chin high, though her knees threaten to buckle. Her plain dress and defiant stare don't spark the fervor her sisters did. Bids come slowly, $1 here, to there each one a fresh wound. Shame battles relief. In her chest, to be unsold is to be free, but to be unwanted stings deeper than she expected. She imagines running, disappearing into the plains, but the weight of her father's debt anchors her. Then, from the shadowed corner of the saloon, a voice cuts through the haze low, steady, like the roll of distant thunder. Clara Hensley, I'll take her. The room falls silent, the air thick with surprise. Heads turn to Elias Boone, a widower whose name carries whispers of tragedy. He stands in the doorway, his broad frame filling the space, his blacksmith's hands scarred and steady, his dark eyes, framed by a face weathered by sun and sorrow, meet Clara's, unreadable, but piercing. His coat is patched, his boots caked with mud, but there's a quiet strength in him. Like the mountains beyond, the crowd parts as he steps forward. His boots heavy on the creaking floor. "No price," he says, his voice firm, cutting through. The murmurs, "My name's enough." Clara freezes, her heart a tangle of fear and fragile hope. Elias Boone, the man who lives alone by the creek, whose wife and son perished in a fire no one dares mention. Whispers paint him as a recluse, maybe a killer, tied to a land dispute that left blood on the plains. Why would he, of all men, offer her salvation? Suspicion coils in her gut, sharp as barbed wire. The auctioneer hesitates, his eyes flicking. To the crowd, but no one challenges Elias. He nods, eager to move on, and scribbles Clara's name in his ledger. Her father stumbles to his feet, muttering slurred thanks, but Clara's glare silences him. She steps off the stage, her shawl clutched tight, and follows Elias into the dusk. Outside, the Wyoming wind bites at her skin, carrying the sharp scent of sagebrush and the promise of rain that never comes. Elias mounts his horse, a sturdy roan, and offers her a hand. She hesitates, searching his face for answers, but his expression gives nothing away. The plains stretch before them, vast and unforgiving, the mountains a dark silhouette against the fading light. As they ride toward his homestead, the silence between them is heavy, broken only by the creak of the saddle and the howl of a distant coyote. Clara's mind races. Has she traded one cage for another? The Wyoming dawn breaks raw and unyielding, its pale light slipping through the splintered gaps of Elias Boone's cabin, tucked against a shallow creek that murmurs like a half-forgotten prayer. The air carries the sharp tang of damp earth, pine, and the faint musk of sagebrush, stirred by a wind that never seems to rest. Beyond the cabin, the plains of Laramie, Wyoming, 1878, stretch wide and merciless, their grasses bowing under the weight of an endless sky. The distant mountains, their peaks jagged as broken teeth, stand sentinel, watching over a land that offers no mercy. Clara Hensley, 22, lingers at the cabin's threshold, her shawl pulled tight against the morning chill. Her auburn hair, loosely pinned, catches the light, and her green eyes, sharp with suspicion, trace the horizon. 5 days have passed since the auction, and each one feels like a step deeper into a life she didn't choose. The cabin is modest, its logs weathered by years of wind and neglect, its porch sagging like an old man's shoulders. Inside, it's a study in absence, bare shelves, a single chair by a stone hearth, a faded quilt draped over a wooden bench, its stitches frayed but deliberate, as if sewn with love long gone. Clara's boots scuff the uneven floor as she moves, her hands restless, itching for purpose. She's no stranger to work years on her father's failing farm taught her to mend fences and churn butter, but this place feels foreign, its silence as heavy as the plains outside. She glances out the window, where Elias works at his forge, a small shed just beyond the cabin. His hammer strikes iron with a steady rhythm, each clang echoing like a heartbeat across the quiet morning. His broad frame, clad in a worn leather apron, moves with a quiet strength, his scarred hands shaping metal with a precision that feels almost sacred. His dark hair falls across his brow, and his eyes, shadowed by grief, avoid hers when she looks too long. Clara's mind churns, her suspicion a constant companion. Why did Elias save her from that wretched auction? A man like him, reclusive, whispered about in Laramie as a figure of tragedy, or worse, doesn't act without motive. The town speaks of a land dispute years ago, blood spilled over water rights, and Elias's name tied to it like a curse. Yet, his actions unsettle her defenses. He's patched the roof where rain seeped through, left a tin mug of coffee steaming on the table each dawn, its bitterness softened by a pinch of sugar she didn't ask for. A wooden comb, its edges smoothed with care, appeared by her bedside on the third day, its simplicity stirring something in her chest she's not ready to name. These small kindnesses feel like cracks in the wall between them, but Clara guards. Her heart, weary of a debt she can't repay, she sweeps the cabin floor, her movements brisk, as if she can sweep away the uncertainty of her new life. Her broom catches on a loose board, and curiosity pulls her to her knees. Beneath the bed, she finds a small wooden box, its lid etched with initials E.B. and L.B. Her fingers trace the letters, her pulse quickening. L.B. Lydia Boone, Elias's late wife. lost with their infant son in a fire the town refuses to explain. Inside, a folded letter, its ink faded, speaks of love and loss in a woman's careful hand. Clara's breath catches, guilt flooding her. She's an intruder in this man's grief, a stranger bound to him by a name, not a vow. She snaps the box shut, shoving it back into the shadows, but the weight of it lingers, heavy as the Wyoming. Wind rattling the windows, the creak of the door pulls her from her thoughts. Elias steps inside, wiping sweat from his brow, his dark eyes catching hers for a fleeting moment before sliding away. "Water needs fetching," he says, his voice low, like the roll of thunder across the plains. Clara nods, grabbing the bucket, but pauses at the threshold. "Why'd you do it, Elias?" she asks, the words sharp and sudden, spilling from a place she can't control. "Why me, of all those girls?" He stiffens, his jaw tightening, a muscle flickering beneath his stubbled cheek. "Didn't seem right," he says, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Leaving you to them wolves in that saloon." His words are clipped, offering no comfort, and he turns back to his forge. Leaving her question dangling like dust in the air, Clara walks to the creek, her boots crunching on frost-kissed grass. The water runs clear, its surface catching the morning light, but its cold bites her fingers as she fills the bucket. The Wyoming landscape surrounds her, its vastness both beautiful and cruel. The wind carrying the faint wail of a coyote hidden in the hills. She feels the land's eyes on her, its silence as guarded as Elias's. Back at the cabin, she sets the bucket down, her gaze catching on a fresh gash in the wooden fence, jagged, deliberate, like a warning carved in haste. Her heart stumbles. Someone's been here, and it wasn't the wind. As dusk paints the plains in shades of fire and shadow, a rider approaches, his horse's hooves kicking up dust that glows in the fading light. Amos Reed, Laramie's wealthiest rancher, sits tall in the saddle, his black horse sleek and restless. His silver spurs glint like knives, and his face sharp angles softened by a practiced smile hides a hunger that makes Clara's skin crawl. "Fine land you've got, Boone," he calls, his voice smooth as oil but laced with the Wyoming twilight spills across the plains like ink, its deep indigo swallowing the last traces of daylight. The air hums with the scent of sagebrush and the faint, metallic tang of a storm that never arrives. Elias Boone's cabin, nestled against a shallow creek, glows faintly under the flicker of a single lantern, its light dancing on the weathered logs like a fragile promise. The creek's soft gurgle weaves through the silence, but beyond, the plains stretch vast and unyielding, their grasses swaying under a sky studded with stars sharp as thorns. The distant mountains, their peaks jagged against the horizon, stand like ancient guardians, watching a land that holds its secrets close. Clara Hensley, 22, sits by the hearth, her auburn hair catching the fire's glow, her green eyes tracing the flames as if they might burn away the doubts that cling to her. 2 weeks in this cabin have softened her sharp edges, but trust remains, a delicate thread, stretched taut between hope and fear. Elias kneels by the forge outside, its embers casting a warm halo round his broad frame. His leather apron is stained with soot, his scarred hands moving with a quiet reverence as he polishes a horseshoe, each stroke deliberate, as if shaping more than iron. Clara watches him through the window, her fingers tightening around the wooden comb he carved for her, its smooth edges a puzzle she can't solve. His silence is a wall, but his small axe coffee left steaming each dawn, a patched roof, a blanket tucked around her when she fell asleep by the fire chip away at her defenses. She wonders what kind of man saves a stranger from an auction, only to guard his heart like a fortress. The town's whispers paint him as a ghost, haunted by a fire that took his wife and son, tied to a land dispute that left blood on the plains. Yet, in his presence, Clara feels a pull, like the creek drawing water to the sea. Inside, the cabin feels less like a cage tonight. Clara stirs a pot of stew, the aroma of sage and venison filling the air, a small rebellion against the sparseness of this life. The hearth's warmth battles the Wyoming chill seeping through the walls, and she hums a half-remembered tune her mother once sang, the notes fragile but defiant. Elias steps inside, wiping sweat from his brow, his dark eyes catching hers for A moment longer than usual. Smells good, he says, his voice low, warm, like the rumble of distant thunder. Clara's lips twitch, a spark of her old wit flaring. Better than your coffee, she teases. Surprised by her own boldness, Elias's mouth curves, a rare smile that cracks his stoic mask. And it's like sunlight piercing a storm cloud. Fair enough, he says, settling at the table, and for the first time, the silence between them feels less like a barrier and more like a bridge. They eat in quiet, the clink of tin spoons against bowls a soft rhythm. Clara ventures a story, her voice hesitant at first, then gaining strength. My ma used to braid bread on Sundays. She says, her eyes distant, said it was her way of praying, kneading hope into the dough. Elias listens, his gaze fixed on the fire, his fingers still on his spoon. Lydia sang hymns, he says after a long pause, his voice barely above a whisper. Her voice, it kept the dark at bay. The name Lydia hangs heavy, a ghost in the room. Clara's heart aches at the rawness in his eyes, a grief he carries like a stone. She wants to reach for him, but instead, she offers her own truth. My pa sold us like we were nothing, she says, her voice steady despite the sting. I thought freedom would feel different, but it's just another kind of weight. Elias looks at her then, his eyes holding a warmth that makes her breath catch. You're more than what they took, he says, the words simple but heavy, and the air shifts, charged with a connection neither dares to name. The next morning, Clara walks to the creek, the frost crunching under her boots, the waters, chill biting her fingers as she fills a bucket. The Wyoming plains shimmer under a pale sun, their vastness both beautiful and cruel, the wind carrying the faint wail of a coyote hidden in the hills. She notices another sign of trouble, a coil of rope by the fence, its ends sliced clean, as if to taunt. Her pulse quickens, the land's silence feeling like a warning. She tells Elias, and his face darkens, his hand tightening on the axe he's using to split wood. Reed's men. He mutters, his voice sharp as flint. The name is a shadow, heavy as the mountains looming beyond. By afternoon, as Clara hangs laundry on a line stretched between two pines, the ground trembles with approaching hoof beats. Amos Reed rides up, flanked by 2 hired men, their faces rough as the Wyoming rock, their rifles slung low. Reed's black horse snorts, its breath steaming in the crisp air, and his silver spurs gleam like a predator's teeth. His smile is sharp, practiced, but his eyes are cold, calculating. Thought you'd see reason, Boone, he says, leaning forward in his saddle. That creek's too rich for a man like you. Elias steps onto the porch, his hammer in hand, its weight, a silent threat. Told you, Reed. Land's mine, he says, his voice steady, unyielding. Reed's gaze slides to Clara, lingering with a hunger that makes her skin crawl. A man gets lonely out here, he says, his tone smooth as venom. I could give you more than this, blacksmith. Girl, land, coin, a name with weight. Clara's stomach twists, but her defiance surges. I've got a name, she snaps, her voice cutting through the air like a whip. And it ain't yours to take. Reed's smile doesn't falter, but his eyes narrow, a storm brewing behind them. He nods to one of his men, who tosses a flint into the dry grass near the barn. The spark doesn't catch, but its message is clear: danger is close. Think on it, Reed says, his voice low, menacing. Accidents happen easy in these parts. He turns his horse, his men following. The Wyoming dawn breaks heavy, the sky bruised with clouds that promise rain, but hold it back. Like secrets to dangers to share, the plains around Elias Boone's cabin shimmer with dew, their grasses whispering under a wind that carries the sharp bite of coming trouble. The creek, usually a gentle murmur, runs swift today, its waters churning against smooth stones, as if sensing the storm brewing beyond the mountains. Clara Hensley stands on the porch, her shawl loose around her shoulders, her auburn hair catching the pale light. Her green eyes, once sharp with suspicion, now hold a quiet resolve, tempered by the fragile bond she's forged with Elias. The cabin, its logs scarred by time, feels less like a stranger's refuge and more like a battlefield, its walls bracing for what's to come. Elias works at the forge, his hammer striking iron with a rhythm that's lost its calm, each clang sharp and urgent. His broad frame, clad in a worn shirt, moves with a tension Clara hasn't seen before, his scarred hands gripping the hammer like a lifeline. She's learned his silences, the way his eyes soften when she hums her mother's tunes, the way his rare smiles linger like sunlight on the plains. But today, his gaze is distant, fixed on the horizon where dust clouds rise, stirred by unseen riders. Clara's heart tightens. She's seen the signs of Reed's men growing bolder, a broken fence, a poisoned well bucket, and now hoofprints circling the barn too close for comfort. The Wyoming landscape, with its vast emptiness and brooding peaks, feels like a conspirator, watching as danger creeps closer. Mid-morning, as Clara tends the garden, her hands digging into the stubborn earth, a shout splits the air. Elias calls her name, his voice raw with warning. She scrambles to her feet, dirt clinging to her dress, and sees 3 riders charging from the plains, their faces masked by bandanas, rifles glinting in the sun. Reed's men. Elias pulls her behind the barn, his hand firm on her arm, his eyes scanning the land like a hawk. Shots ring out, splintering the barn's wood, and Clara's pulse thunders, fear mingling with fury. Elias shoves a rifle into her hands, his voice low but steady. "Stay low, aim true." She nods, her fingers trembling, but her grip firm, her defiance flaring against the chaos. They return fire, the crack of gunshots echoing across the plains, the air thick with dust and gunpowder. One rider falls, his horse bolting, but another grazes Elias's shoulder, blood blooming dark against his shirt. Clara drags him into the cabin, her hands shaking as she tears a strip from her apron to bind his wound. The firelight casts shadows across his face, his jaw clenched against the pain. "I'm fine," he mutters, but his voice is weak, his eyes feverish. Clara's heart pounds, her fingers brushing his as she ties the cloth, the warmth of his skin sparking something she can't ignore. "You're not fine," she snaps, her voice sharp but laced with fear. "You don't get to. Leave me now." Elias looks at her, his gaze raw, unguarded, and for a moment, the world narrows to the space between them. Then, in a voice rough with pain, he speaks words that shatter her. "Your pa, he was part of it. Clara, the land dispute. He and Reed, they sold what wasn't theirs. I saw it. Couldn't stop it." The confession lands like a blow, stealing her breath. Her father, Thomas, the man who sold her at auction, was tied to the fight that cost Elias his family. Clara's mind reels, memories of her father's late-night deals with Reed flashing like lightning. Elias's silence all these weeks wasn't pity, it was atonement. His offer at the auction, a way to right a wrong she never knew existed. Her anger surges, hot and bitter, but so does her awe at his sacrifice. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispers, her voice breaking. Elias's eyes meet hers, heavy with guilt. "Didn't want you to carry his shame," he says. "You're not him." The Wyoming night presses close, its stars hidden by clouds, the wind howling like a chorus of ghosts. Clara's hands linger on Elias's wound, her touch gentle now, her heart torn between betrayal and a love she's only beginning to name. She thinks of the land deeds Lydia mentioned in her letter, hidden somewhere in this cabin, proof of Reed's crimes. "And maybe their salvation. We'll fight this," she says, her voice steady, fierce. Elias nods, his hand finding hers, a silent vow. Together they search the cabin, finding a tin box under a floorboard, its contents brittle but damning, deeds proving Reed's fraud, signed by her father's trembling hand. As dawn breaks, the plains glow faintly, the mountains standing watch. The creek's churn mirrors Clara's resolve, the land itself urging them forward. They plan to ride to Laramie, to expose Reed before he strikes again. The cabin, once a refuge, now feels like a fortress, its walls holding their shared truth. Clara looks at Elias, his bloodied shoulder a testament to their fight, and knows they're bound not just by necessity, but by something deeper, forged in the fire of this unforgiving land. The Wyoming morning dawns sharp and clear, the plains bathed in a golden glow that softens the harsh edges of Laramie's dusty streets. The air carries the bite of sagebrush and the faint hum of anticipation, as if the land itself knows a reckoning is near. Clara Hensley and Elias Boone ride side by side, their horses' hooves kicking up dust that shimmers in the sunlight. Clara's auburn hair is tied back, her green eyes fierce with resolve. Her faded dress a stark contrast to the tin box clutched in her hands, its brittle deeds. The key to Amos Reed's downfall. Elias, his shoulder bandaged but his posture unyielding, grips the reins with scarred hands, his dark eyes scanning the horizon. The mountains loom in the distance, their peaks steady as sentinels, watching over a land that's seen too much greed and too little mercy. The creek's distant murmur follows them, a reminder of what they're fighting for. Laramie's saloon looms ahead, its weathered planks a grim echo of the auction that bound Clara to Elias weeks ago. The town buzzes with whispers, ranchers, shopkeepers, and drifters drawn by rumors of a confrontation. Clara's heart pounds, her father's betrayal a weight in her chest, but Elias's presence beside her is a quiet anchor. They step through the saloon doors, the air thick with whiskey and tension. The same crowd that bartered her sisters now watching with wary eyes. Amos Reed stands at the bar, his silver spurs glinting, his smile sharp as a blade. Boone, he drawls, his voice smooth but venomous, come to beg for that creek. His hired men, rifles slung low, flank him, their faces hard as the Wyoming rock. Clara steps forward, her chin high, the tin box raised like a shield. This ain't about begging, she says, her voice cutting through the murmurs. It's about what's right. She opens the box, pulling out the deeds. They're faded ink, a testament to Reed's fraud. These prove you stole this land, worked with my pa to cheat honest folks. The crowd stirs, whispers rippling like the creek's current. Reed's smile falters, his eyes narrowing. Lies, he snaps, but Clara holds his gaze, her defiance a fire that won't be doused. My shame ain't mine, she says, her voice steady despite the ache, but I'm here to end yours. Elias stands beside her, his broad frame a silent vow. You took enough, Reed, he says, his voice low, resonant, like thunder rolling across the plains. He lays out the deeds, pointing to signatures her father's, Reed's, and others long buried. You and Thomas Hensley sold what wasn't yours. Blood's on your hands, not mine. The saloon falls silent, the truth landing like a gunshot. A rancher in the crowd steps forward, then another, their faces hardening as they read the deeds. The sheriff, a grizzled man who's long avoided Reed's shadow, pushes through, his badge glinting. That's enough, he says, his voice firm. Reed, you're coming with me. Reed's hand twitches toward his revolver, but Elias is faster, his own gun drawn. Steady as the mountains. Don't, Elias warns, his eyes unyielding. Reed's men hesitate, outnumbered by the townsfolk now closing in, their greed replaced by outrage. Reed's smile twists into a snarl as the sheriff cuffs him, his empire crumbling like dust in the wind. The crowd parts as he's led away, his spurs clinking, a hollow echo of his former power. Clara's breath catches, relief mingling with grief for the father she can't forgive. Elias's hand brushes hers, a fleeting touch that grounds her, and she meets his eyes, seeing not just the widower who saved her, but the man she's come to love. Outside, the Wyoming sun climbs higher, bathing the plains in light. Clara and Elias ride back to the cabin, the deeds secured, their land safe. The creek sparkles, its waters a promise of new beginnings. They dismount, standing close, the air soft with possibility. Elias takes her hand, his scarred fingers gentle, and Clara leans into him, their lips meeting in a kiss that feels like the land itself fears, enduring, alive. The mountains stand watch, their silence no longer heavy, but hopeful, the plains stretching wide with the promise of home. In the 1870s, 1890s Wild West, women often had little control over their fates, with some families driven to desperate acts like auctions to settle debts. Land disputes, fueled by water rights and greed, sparked violence across Wyoming, but communities could rally for justice when truth prevailed. This story reflects the resilience of those who fought for what was right, even in a harsh world. What did you think of Clara and Elias's stand for justice? Would you fight for truth like they did? Drop your thoughts in the comments and hit like and subscribe to join us for more Wild West tales. Let's keep the frontier alive.